Hey, welcome back to another Haven't Read It video. Today's video, we have 5 malicious compliance stories for you. First story of the day.
You want the server down during business hours? You got it. I used to work IT at a mid-sized logistics company. Our warehouse ran 24/7, but the corporate office was open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I was responsible for maintaining the internal server that handled everything from payroll to inventory management to shipping labels. One Monday morning, I got an email from a higher up, let's call her Karen, demanding that we take the server offline immediately for scheduled maintenance. Now, I had scheduled that maintenance for Sunday evening, sent out 3 notices, and got no objections. But Karen hadn't read those emails and was now insisting we do it right now during her working hours. I replied, taking the server offline during business hours will temporarily halt access to the shipping system, inventory, time tracking, and payroll processing. Confirm you'd like me to proceed. She replied, and I quote, yes, you should be working on my schedule. Get it done now. All right, malicious compliance time. I looped in the warehouse manager and let him know the system would be down per Karen's urgent request. Then I pulled the plug at exactly 10:30 a.m. Within 15 minutes, the office was in chaos. No one could clock in or out, print labels, track shipments, or even check inventory levels. Phones were ringing off the hook. The CFO stormed into my office asking what the hell was going on. I just showed him the email thread. Less than 30 minutes later, Karen came to my office, red-faced and yelling. I calmly pointed out that she had approved the server downtime in writing despite warnings. I offered to restore access early, but reminded her it would take time to reboot and check for errors from the forced shutdown. Fallout, oh yes. She got dragged into a meeting with the COO and CTO that afternoon. From what I heard, it didn't go well for her. After that, all urgent IT requests from management had to go through a change management process with multiple approvals. I also got a little bonus on my next paycheck for handling the outage with professionalism. Sometimes the best way to teach someone why we have procedures is to let them break one once.
Top comment says, the crazy thing is that she needed control so much, but it defied all logical reason. They quote, it must be done in my time. But why though? That makes no sense. Glad she got what she deserved. Someone replies, I don't think she did get what she deserved. I've seen people fired for costing a company a lot less money. It was practically corporate sabotage, especially with OP telling her all the systems that would be affected. And OP also responds, totally agree. Sometimes the only way to learn is when their own demands backfire. Justice served. Next top comment says, yeah, when someone asks you to verify your demand in writing, you should always rethink your decision. When IT asks, are you sure? You should put your ego aside and realize you're about to screw up royally. Some replies to this comment are, and in an email of all things. Next reply, use this for the first time in my life yesterday. New manager was asking for us to break the rules to make the metrics that determine our team's compensation look better. I asked for it in writing and she immediately went from headstrong, my way or the highway, to, I'll get back to you. Next reply says, I've had a couple different PMs over the years override my objections and have them always in writing say to do something and always end up with them freaking out when it goes exactly the way I said it would. Listen to your IT people. Next reply says, I feel this. Getting an email from IT saying, are you sure? Was like a handbrake for me, making me triple check everything. The last reply says, that's why a phone call is the last way I communicate at work. Email me, text if it's time sensitive. If things go sideways, I'm not getting thrown under a bus. Next comment says, that's the sort of person who reads a dodgy email, infects a whole company, and takes the company offline until it's fixed. OP responds, haha, exactly. The kind of person who's too sure to know better, then ends up causing way bigger problems. It's almost impressive how quickly they can escalate things. Last comment says, at a wastewater treatment plant, when I used to work, we had something similar happen accidentally. New guy wiped a Cisco switch stack. That's a long story. All network gear became instant breaks, and Cisco said there was no way to correct it except shipping the equipment back to them. All the servers, workstations, and equipment still functioned perfectly, but nothing could communicate. No network. Failsafes kicked in, and the entire process shut down. After 30 minutes, we began bypassing raw sewage into the river. I figured out how to reload the Cisco OS and rebuild the stacks. He wiped everything on those stacks. Simple task to download the file and TFTP to the switches and router over our T1. Except no network. No T1. 2400 baud modem was all we had. I think the downloads took like 12 hours, and then uploading via TFTP to flash a switch took another god-awful amount of time. 18 hours later, we were back online. No one ever said the computers were all just flashing lights again. Looking at you, Mr. GM. The board approved IT budget requests much faster after that as well. New guy was not fired. He followed the department head's directions perfectly. Department head was reassigned to another department, HR. Second story of the day. Absolutely must restore my important files. One of my early jobs was managing the backend server and database for a desktop/laptop file backup system. Very big company, and we had all the sales and management laptops on regular backup schedules. Often, the database would crash and we would have to rebuild it. This meant restoring files using the automated process was offline for a few hours to sometimes a few days. Management put out a notice that any restore requests must get my manager's approval before we did a manual restore. Most times it could wait for a day or so. This one sales guy insisted that we restore his supercritical sales documents immediately, or he would escalate to senior management. My manager told him to wait for one more day. Nope, he went straight to the CTO and got his way. So as part of the manual restore process, we print out the complete file list of what we would be restoring and copied all the files to a DVD that was to be sent to the user. 95% of the files that were to be restored were porn pics and videos with a few Word docs and spreadsheets. So after printing the 20-plus page file report and burning the DVD, I took it to my manager. She smiled and immediately set an appointment with the CTO. Needless to say, the sales guy had a very intense meeting with the CTO, sales VP, and HR. I heard he denied to the end those files were his. I wonder what he told his wife when he had to look for another job. Too long didn't read. Be careful when you escalate with IT to restore your critical files. They will find those others you shouldn't have been saving to your work computer. Top comment says, it's really weird that someone would be backing up porn on company servers. I bet regular audits done now would catch them within a week or two of it happening. Someone replies, it happens a lot. People are stupid. Next top comment says, I saw the aftermath of a guy using a colleague's account to phone sex services. Big bill gets flagged. Innocent person gets called into HR. Has credible defense like, when? That day and time I was in a meeting. And that day I wasn't even in the office. And a more diligent investigation finds the real culprit. The fact that he used a colleague's account made it fraud instead of misuse of resources. Next comment says, at my old job in the early 2000s, they fired a tester that was watching porn all day on his work laptop. Someone replies, same time frame for me. Our IT department used a product called Ghost that would copy the software image from a source laptop to new laptops for employees. Sales guy is on the way to a client meeting, loses an image he needs, goes looking through his browser cache, finds all the porn. He'd been with the company a few weeks. The laptop was brand new. Files were dated prior to his hire date. Yeah, someone in IT was surfing porn on the master laptop. Said guy was encouraged to find success elsewhere. Next comment says, at one point in my career, I had a side gig doing network and web design for an assisted living facility. I got to be good friends with one of the owners and maintain his personal computers as well. One day he brought me his Sony laptop that was misbehaving. It was loaded with porn and massive numbers of infected files. His 22-year-old son had borrowed the machine and found just about every porn site that was loaded with malware. After I scrubbed the machine and restored it from the latest backup we had, I returned it to him. Not a week later, he was back with the same problems. I suggested he get his son his own crappy laptop and keep the bastard away from his decent one. Next comment says, there have been times we'd have to rebuild someone's computer because they got a virus or malware. Then a week later, it would get infected again. At that point, I would casually mention that if it happens a third time, the security team would get involved and do a full scan of your drive's contents and your internet activity. I never had someone get a third one. I did have someone raise holy hell and call us incompetent. He was being an ass about it because it happened to him a second time. I passed that one off to security and they found porn. Last comment. Before I started working IT, I thought that most stories were made up. But now, several years later, oh boy, the things you get to witness. An older colleague who is in the first level support has the best stories. Apparently there was one guy who forgot to click the end call button in a meeting and then proceeded to watch porn on the company laptop with speakers, mic, and camera on. Next story. Some funny shit. This story was recounted to my uncle years ago by his buddy Paul, and he just had to share it with us.
When my father and his brother were little kids, they used to get harassed by this annoying old lady who lived in the neighborhood and just loved to get into their business. She'd see them on their way home from running errands for my grandmother, and she'd call them over, saying, "What you boys got in that bag? Let me see." Since they were kids and they were taught that they had to obey their elders, they had no choice but to comply with the old bitch's request to let her inspect their bag. She never took anything, but I guess she just got off on fucking with 2 kids. Anyway, one day, they had enough of that bullshit, so my dad and my uncle each took a big shit into a bag, and as per their routine, walked past the old bitch's house. Sure enough, there came the familiar croak of, "What you boys got in that bag?" "Let me see." The boys handed over the bag and ran like hell. My father said that when the old crow told my grandparents what they had done, he and my uncle got a major ass whooping that night, but it was worth it, and that old bat never fucked with them again.
Top comment says, the house at Pooh Corner. Someone replies, you win. Sometimes the only way to win is to get dirty. Literally. Next comment says, glad to hear that shit worked on ending her bullshit. This comment says, sounds like a pretty crappy situation. Next comment, why the ass whooping? It's not like they set it on fire at her front door. Well, you know what they say, shit happens. Can't believe that she or he went for it. Straight up savagery. By the way, in my opinion, this kind of stuff is the pure fire that feeds my soul on this app. Man, some P's got zero chill and I'm here for it. Next story. Do all the paperwork yourself or get 0%. In high school, I was in a science class that I did very well in. I was top of the class and scored nearly 100% on every test and assignment. The teacher assigned a big group project that would take about a week to complete with a team of 4 students. Groups were randomly assigned, and unfortunately, I was paired up with 3 kids who were barely passing the class. In class, we are given time to make plans together as a group to divide up work, examine the instructions, schedule times outside of school to meet up, etc. It was at this point my teammates decided to tell me that they weren't going to do any work on the project. I asked why, and they said they knew I really cared about my grade, so they figured I would do it on my own. They were so lazy they were banking on the fact I wouldn't tank my own grade, so they could benefit off of my hard work when I inevitably got a good score on the project. I was pissed and said that was unfair. They dug in and said, too bad. Now you either do this project yourself or you'll get a 0%. Cue malicious compliance. Now I could have gone to the teacher and he probably would have sorted this out, but a better idea struck me. So I said, fine, you win, I'll do what you say. They smiled smugly and thought that was that. But you see, this teacher had a policy that at the end of the semester, your lowest grade, excluding finals, would be taken off your record. So if you forgot to turn in an assignment or did really bad on one test, you got a mulligan so it wouldn't ruin your final grade. I had never done poorly on an assignment all year, so I never needed my mulligan. However, I knew that these shitheads all did. If they got a big fat 0 on a crucial assignment, they would probably fail the class. So I did exactly as they instructed. I did no work on the project all week. Just sat on it and bided my time. At the beginning of the next week, all the students turned in their assignments. My team watched as I sat in my chair, unmoving. Finally, one said, hey OP, aren't you going to turn in the project? Oh, I didn't do the project. They were shocked and asked why the hell I didn't do it. You said do all the work or get a 0%. I choose 0%. They were all royally pissed. They all had to do credit recovery over the summer. They hated my guts, but I couldn't have cared less. It was the most satisfying failing grade in my entire life. Top comment says, I've done this before even without the mulligan. I just ate the 0. I was written up and sent to the principal. Principal said, you'll get a 0. I replied, that's fine, I'll take the 0. I have straight A's in a class, I don't care. He goes, go back to class and take your 0 then. I got a 0, the rest of the group also got a 0. They failed the class that had to repeat it because the 0 dropped their already low grades below the cutoff. I got an A in the class anyway because I aced all the tests. Someone replies, had this stupid janky online homework thing in physics in college. It only accepted the exact answer, so if you had the slightest thing wrong, it was wrong. I tried with it first semester and had over 100% in the class since all the tests had some extra credit options. Second semester, if I didn't solve it right away, I just put in a number and hit submit. At one point, my professor pulled me aside and said, I clearly wasn't trying hard on it. I asked him if I had an A+ in the class, and he confirmed I did. That ended that conversation. So to translate, I guess the homework was less than the extra credit points on the tests. Guess that makes sense. Next top comment says, I did this with the group project in college. I ended up needing a weird distribution credit in a 100 level class my senior year. I took it with a professor I'd had multiple times before. I was so bored. I did all the extra credit, got A's on everything, and had more than 100% in class. I didn't bother to go into the professor. If I got a 0, I was still getting an A. Although I didn't turn anything in, I still got an A on the project. Confused, I went to office hours to ask about it. The professor said he couldn't imagine I hadn't done the work and turned it in. So he figured he misplaced our assignment and just gave us all A's. He fixed our scores. Someone replies, talked him down from A to 0 out of spite. I love it. Last comment says, way back in college, I had a group assignment in my 100 level database class. I already knew what I was doing, so I happily took the lead on the technical side of the project as the rest of the team handled the presentation. I did small instructional write-ups for the other group members, migrations, shell scripts for bootstrapping and updating the database for doing work locally or on the virtual machine we were assigned. Everything. Except one of our members only showed up to class maybe 3 times all semester, and one of them was presentation day. Our professor already knew he hadn't done jack shit because we told her well in advance. So we just stood back and let him stumble all over himself during the presentation and earn his 0 while the rest of us aced it. If he had put in even a tiny amount of effort, he would have realized he didn't actually have to do much work at all because I did all the hard stuff already. But he still managed to get a 0. Not remotely sorry. People like this just simply aren't that smart. Someone replies, oh man, I love group projects. No one ever wanted to present. I didn't particularly want to do a lot of the actual work, so I always offered to present and do less actual work. And everyone was happy. I didn't suck at presenting though. Last story of the day. No more drugs in the workplace? Okay.
My pet peeve is poorly written policy. If you are going to go to the effort of writing the rules, you may as well do it properly and not get the intern to do it. My wife came home one day and showed a printout of her company's new workplace fitness for work policy that had been sent to all employees to sign in return. My wife, being my wife, decided to run it past me before she signed because I am, well, me. It was mostly an amateurish document that was ultimately a waste of ink and trees, but did have a little bit to say about drugs in the workplace, which was essentially do not come to the work under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and do not bring drugs or alcohol to work. I told her not to sign until they, at the very least, defined what drugs were. Were they including Tylenol, antibiotics, Ritalin, or just the illegal ones and recreational pharmaceuticals? Fast forward a couple of days, version 2.0 of the document is presented. They fleshed out the drugs policy a little, basically using the dictionary definition, something along the lines of a non-prescription substance which has a physiological or mood-altering effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. Okay, time for malicious compliance. She signed and presented it to HR the next day and went about her work. During the morning, there were increasing amounts of confusion and frustrated loud voices in the office. Apparently, it only took an hour before 0 work was being done, and there was a crowd of workers around the break room. The manager eventually zeroed in on my wife, apparently the only one who wasn't looking confused, and asked if she had anything to do with stealing all the coffee in the break room. She admitted it was her, and pointed out the new fitness for work policy, which prohibited the consumption of mood-altering substances in the workplace. He tried to argue that it was just coffee, but she pointed out that it was definitely a mood-altering substance, as per company policy, and as such, was not allowed to be on the premises without a prescription. She'd made her point. She retrieved the coffee she'd stashed in the storeroom. The office mood was altered, and the company actually commissioned a functional fitness for work policy based upon the published government guidelines.
Top comment says, Amazon has a similar badly worded policy. After I was injured at work, they tried to, actually, and I refused to work under the effect of my prescription painkillers. It was the right thing to do for my health, but the bonus was getting them riled. Someone replies, here in Germany it says illegal drugs and alcohol, which makes me think I could technically go to work high because we legalized weed the other day. Next top comment says, my work made a COVID-related policy. You can't come to work for 7 days if you have a cough or runny nose or any cold and flu-like symptoms. I've had chronic sinusitis for 40 plus years. During that time, I was the only person employed at that location. We have a robust employment agreement, so I still got paid. I'm sure you can guess how that worked out. Needless to say, after about 3 weeks, the policy was changed to something like symptoms that are new to you. Next comment, even sugar would qualify. OP responds, "Hey man, got any of that white powder?" Another comment says, "At my last place, the policy was worded as any alcohol, any prescription drug you didn't have an active prescription for, marijuana, or the usual illegal drugs was a violation. I worked with a bunch of field techs and computer/networking geeks. If they ever tried to ban caffeine, we'd have an open rebellion on our hands." OP responds, "So unusual illegal drugs were allowed? Cool workplace." Next comment quotes OP, "During the morning, there was an increased amount of confusion and frustrated loud voices in the office. Apparently, it only took an hour before zero work was being done, and there was a crowd of workers around the break room." They say, "Yeah, that's called addiction." OP responds, "I can give up any time I want. I just don't want to." Someone else replies, "I give up every night." Last comment says, "When I was 17, I had my first job in an office. I didn't drink coffee then, so I didn't understand. I saw something on YouTube about how it was funny to replace the office coffee with decaf. I thought I'd give it a try. First fucking week of my life, it was chaos. People crying at their desks and not understanding why. Everyone had a headache. No work got done. Everyone was angry. 40-year-old me, who can't get out of bed without caffeine, would kick my 17-year-old ass. Pranks are supposed to be funny, people. That's not funny." Crying at their desks. Oh man, thanks for listening to these stories. Comment in your stories, drug related or other malicious stories. Oh man, I'll read them in a future video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.